The silence of the late afternoon was not empty but full. It was a thick, heavy blanket woven with the scent of pine and damp earth. For Leo, this was the only world he knew, a landscape painted in vibrations and light. And then the canvas tore. A flicker of motion at the edge of his vision, a frantic blur of pink and denim that shattered the tranquility of his porch-side vigil. A little girl, no older than 7, was sprinting across the overgrown lawn, her small legs pumping with a desperation that defied her size. Her face was a mask of pure terror, her mouth open in a silent scream that he could see but never hear, a desperate plea already lost to the quiet air that was his constant companion. He felt her arrival before he truly saw its detail. It was a tremor through the old wooden floorboards of the porch, a frantic, stuttering rhythm that telegraphed panic more effectively than any siren ever could. Leo was a student of these silent languages. He could distinguish the heavy, deliberate tread of the mailman from the skittish dance of a squirrel on the roof. This, however, was something new. This was the vibration of a heart about to burst, a terror so profound it had its own physical signature. He remained perfectly still, his calm a stark island in her storm, his eyes narrowing to decipher the story her body was screaming at him, a story written in the language of pure, unadulterated fear. She stumbled onto the bottom step, her small hands grabbing the railing to keep from falling. The words tumbled out of her, a torrent of sound he could only perceive as puffs of air and the frantic shaping of her lips. "Please, you have to help me," she sobbed, her chest heaving. "It's my mom, she's in the house, she won't wake up." He watched the frantic movement, the way her eyes, wide and swimming with tears, darted from his face to the small cottage visible through the trees. She pointed with a trembling finger, the gesture sharp and urgent. The sounds were meaningless to him, but the meaning was not in the sound. It was in the raw, primal terror etched onto her face. Leo's world required a different kind of listening. He listened with his eyes, tracing the lines of panic around her mouth, the stark white of her knuckles as she gripped the wood. He saw the story not in her words, but in their desperate, unheard rhythm. He saw the way she pointed back toward her home, a gesture not of invitation but of sheer, helpless horror. In the silent space between them, an understanding began to form, a bridge built not of words but of shared humanity. He could see the ghost of a question in her eyes. Asterisk, do you understand? Can you help? Asterisk, it was a question that needed no sound to be heard, a plea that resonated deep within the quiet chambers of his world. He held her gaze for a long moment, the forest's deep silence pressing in around them. The child's frantic breathing was the only percussion in a world of stillness. In that moment, the barrier of silence evaporated, replaced by a singular, shared purpose. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of a promise, an acceptance of a mystery he could not yet comprehend. He rose from his chair, the old wood groaning softly beneath him, and took the first step off the porch, following the terrified little girl into a silence that was suddenly charged with a terrible, unknown danger. What they would find in that quiet house was a question whose answer already hung, heavy and unspoken, in the air. He couldn't hear the frantic words tumbling from her lips, but he didn't need to. Sound was a language he'd long forgotten, replaced by a more primal, honest communication. He saw the language of terror. It was in the frantic tremor of her small hands, the wild motion of her eyes seeing a ghost just behind him. Her chest heaved with sobs that were, to him, silent, rhythmic convulsions of panic. The world for Leo was a silent film, and this child was giving the performance of her life, a monologue of dread written in the undeniable architecture of fear. Most people would be lost in a sea of confused questions. Leo's world, however, demanded a different perception. He saw past the noise she was making and focused on the signal, a child whose world had just been shattered. Instead of mirroring her panic, he became its opposite, an anchor of stillness. He slowly knelt, bringing his face level with hers, a deliberate act to enter her terrified space as an equal. He placed a hand gently over his heart, held it there, and then extended his open palm toward her. It was a perfected gesture, a silent question and a statement. "I see you. I am here. Trust me." The effect was immediate. The girl's unheard pleas didn't stop, but their frantic edge softened, replaced by a focused urgency. She saw that he was listening, just not with his ears. Her small hand shot out, not to grab him, but to point, stabbing the air with a trembling finger back towards the dense woods she emerged from. Her entire body became an arrow, a living compass pointing to the source of her horror. Her face, tear-streaked and pale, crumpled with the effort of conveying the enormity of what she'd witnessed, a story trapped behind his silence and her shock. Leo held her gaze, his eyes absorbing every detail. He saw the story there, fragmented but clear, a plea, a warning, and a desperate hope that he was the answer. In that silent, suspended moment, a promise was forged. It was a vow made without sound, a contract signed with a shared look of understanding. He gave a single, slow, deliberate nod. It was more than acknowledgement, it was acceptance. It said, "I understand enough. I will carry this." His focus then shifted from her face to the dark, tree-lined path she indicated, his calm demeanor hardening into a mask of grim resolve. He rose to his feet, gently taking her small, cold hand in his. The contact was grounding, a physical manifestation of the promise just made. His grip was firm, a shield against her chaos, yet gentle enough to convey safety. He didn't pull or rush. He simply stood with her for a moment, a silent guardian, and then took the first step, letting her guide him. His eyes, once passive, were now active and predatory. They swept the landscape not as an observer but as a hunter searching for the broken twig, the single thread out of place, the first clue in the mystery he'd just sworn to solve. He followed the small hand pulling him forward, a silent guide through quiet suburban streets. Each step was a drumbeat of dread. Leo braced himself for what he would find, his mind a grim theater of possibilities. A forced entry, shattered glass, the chaotic signature of a struggle. He lived without sound, but he anticipated the loud silence of a crime scene, an aftermath screaming with unspoken horrors. Lily never looked back, her being focused on the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, a place that was meant to be a sanctuary. Reba was now the heart of a nightmare. As they approached, the scene was unsettling in its normality. The lawn was manicured, the porch light on, not a single window out of place. The front door was slightly ajar, a subtle invitation, but showed no marks of forced entry. This was wrong. The quiet order was more unnerving than the chaos he had expected. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, pretending nothing had happened. This peaceful facade felt like a carefully constructed lie, a mask hiding something far more disturbing than simple violence. Stepping over the threshold, Leo's senses went into overdrive. The air was still, carrying no scent of fear. The living room was tidy, almost staged. A television remote sat perfectly parallel to a coffee table's edge. A magazine lay open, its pages undisturbed. It was this absence of disorder that struck him as the most profound kind of disorder. This wasn't the scene of a panicked fight for survival. There was a precision to the quiet, a deliberate stillness that felt deeply unnatural, as if someone took great care to erase any disruption. His eyes, trained to notice details others miss, began to catalog the inconsistencies. A single coaster on the floor, but the glass it held was gone. A framed photo on the mantelpiece was tilted by a fraction of an inch, an imperfection too small for a casual glance but glaring to him. A throw blanket on the sofa was draped, not tossed, as if carefully arranged to conceal something, or perhaps its absence. These were not clues of a battle. They were whispers of a presence that was meticulous, controlled, and utterly terrifying in its subtlety. Leo stood in the center of the room, the silence pressing in. He realized then that he had been wrong. This was not the aftermath of a violent act. There was no struggle here because there had been no chance to struggle. Whatever happened to Lily's mother was not a physical altercation. It was a quiet, seamless removal. An erasure. The enemy they faced was not a monster who broke down doors, but a ghost who walked through them, leaving behind nothing but a chilling, perfect void. The empty scene was more terrifying than any destruction. Where others would be deafened by the ringing of their own fear, Leo was immersed in a perfect, analytical calm. For him, silence was not an absence of sound, but the canvas upon which the world painted its truths. He let Lily's silent sobs fade into the periphery, his focus narrowing to the room itself. It was a language he understood intimately, the grammar of misplaced objects, the syntax of disturbed dust. He wasn't looking for clues in the way a detective might. He was reading a story. Every object held a potential sentence, every shadow a punctuation mark. The police would come and listen for confessions and alibis. Leo was already listening to the room, and it was telling him things no human voice ever could. His eyes scanned the floor, moving past the larger, more obvious signs of disarray. He ignored the overturned vase and the scattered cushions. Those were misdirection, the loud, clumsy shouts of a staged intrusion. His attention settled on the edge of a large Persian rug. There, barely visible, was a faint, linear disturbance in the pile. Not the frantic scuffs of a struggle, but the smooth, deliberate drag marks of something heavy being moved with care. The fibers weren't torn or frayed, they were simply persuaded. He followed the almost imperceptible trail with his gaze, a ghost of a path leading directly to the base of a tall mahogany bookshelf. This was not chaos. This was choreography. At the bookshelf, his hyperacute vision continued its silent interrogation. A common thief would have left a conspicuous gap, a void where a treasure once sat. But Leo saw the opposite, something far more unsettling. A single leather-bound volume of classic poetry was misaligned, pushed a mere 2 millimeters deeper into the shelf than its neighbors. It was a detail so infinitesimally small it would be invisible to a casual glance. He moved closer, his breath held. The fine layer of settled dust on the shelf was broken in a perfect rectangle around the book, but the book's spine was itself clean. Someone hadn't taken something. They had meticulously checked something behind it and replaced it with an almost flawless, but not quite perfect, precision. From the book, his gaze drifted to the large bay window that overlooked the garden. The lock was secure, the latch unbroken. The police would have declared it clear in a second, but Leo saw what they would miss. On the cool glass, just beside the wooden frame, was a faint, greasy smudge, its whorls unlike any fingerprint. It was the chemical signature of a specific synthetic polymer used in high-dexterity tactical gloves. Below it, on the painted white sill, were microscopic scratches in the wood, not from force but from the delicate, probing tip of a tool used to test the seal, to check for weaknesses without leaving any audible or obvious trace. It was the work of a ghost. Leo stepped back, the disparate pieces clicking into place in his mind. The carefully moved furniture. The precisely replaced book. The professional, non-destructive entry check. This was not a burglary. It was an audit. An intelligence-gathering mission. The intruder's goal wasn't to steal, it was to learn. They wanted to know what Lily had, where she kept it, and how easily they could get to it. The entire scene was a violation not of property, but of sanctuary. It was a silent, terrifying declaration of power, a message that said, I can be anywhere, I can see anything, and you will never even hear me coming. And in the profound silence of his world, Leo was the only one who could truly understand the gravity of that threat. His eyes scanned past the overturned cushions and the slightly ajar cabinet doors, dismissing them as superficial distractions. They were the kind of chaos meant to be seen, a theatrical performance of a struggle that never happened. Leo's world, built on the architecture of sight, demanded a deeper truth. He moved through the living room, his gaze tracing the subtle geographies of the space. The faint scuff marks near the entryway, the precise alignment of picture frames on a far wall. Everything was a quiet contradiction. The scene screamed of violence but whispered of order. It was in this whisper that the real story lay hidden, waiting for an eye trained to listen. He drifted towards the hallway, drawn by an almost imperceptible glint of light reflecting off a surface that should have been dull. It was a forgotten corner, a place where dust was allowed to settle, a silent testament to the passage of time. There, on the dark wood of an antique credenza, lay the anomaly. A fine, even layer of gray dust coated the entire surface, undisturbed except for one specific area. It wasn't a handprint, not a smudge from a hastily placed object. It was a deliberate mark, a pattern traced with the tip of a single finger. The lines were clean, the pressure consistent. It was drawn with a steady, unhurried hand, an act of quiet intention in a room supposedly filled with panic and fear. Leo knelt, his face just inches from the wood, studying the miniature landscape of disturbed particles. The dust, which had recorded the room's stillness, now held a message. This wasn't evidence of a crime. It was a signature, a piece of communication left behind not by accident, but by design. The symbol itself was unnerving, a thing of elegant and alien geometry. It was a perfect circle, but within it, 3 lines converged at the center, branching out like the roots of a dead tree. At the end of each line was a smaller, solid dot. It was not a letter from any alphabet he knew, nor was it a religious icon he could recognize. It felt ancient, imbued with a purpose that defied simple explanation. It was a sigil, a glyph, a key to a lock he didn't even know existed. Its presence on this piece of furniture in this quiet suburban home was a profound and terrifying dissonance. It was a secret language spoken in a place of domestic normalcy, a whisper of a world operating just beneath the surface of the one everyone else saw. Instantly, the entire narrative of the scene fractured and reassembled itself in Leo's mind. The missing signs of a struggle, the subtle order within the chaos, and now this symbol. Clara wasn't taken. A person taken by force fights back, They leave behind overturned lamps, broken glass, the visceral evidence of their resistance. They do not pause to calmly and precisely draw a cryptic symbol in the dust. This was an act of compliance, an act of ritual. She was coerced, yes, but not by physical force. She was manipulated, lured, or perhaps she had made a choice, guided by a belief or a fear so powerful that it compelled her to walk out of her own home, leaving this strange emblem as the only clue to her departure. The focus of the investigation had now irrevocably shifted. The search for a kidnapper was a fool's errand. The real perpetrator wasn't a person in a ski mask, but an idea, a belief system represented by this single silent mark in the dust. The symbol was everything. It was the why, the how, and the where. It was a breadcrumb leading not to a location, but to an understanding. Leo knew then that the police would find nothing. They were looking for a monster of flesh and blood, but the entity that took Clara was something far older, far more insidious. And it had left its calling card, a chilling invitation for anyone with the eyes to see it, to follow her down the rabbit hole. The symbol wasn't an answer, it was a question. And the walls of this house, once a source of clues, had fallen silent. Leo knew the investigation could no longer be contained within the crime scene tape. The clue he held in his mind was a key, but the lock wasn't here. It was out there, hidden in the mundane theater of suburban life. The quiet street, with its manicured lawns and identical mailboxes, was no longer a backdrop. It was the new search area, an intricate ecosystem of routines and relationships that he needed to decode. To do that, he had to become what he had always been, but with purpose. A ghost. A silent observer, watching from the periphery, his presence as unremarkable as a shadow shifting with the sun. He retreated to the familiar solitude of his own home, the window of his study becoming a sniper's nest of observation. His world, devoid of the distraction of sound, sharpened his other senses to a razor's edge. He didn't hear the mail truck approaching. He saw its reflection in a neighbor's window 2 houses down. He didn't hear the children's laughter. He saw the subtle shift in a mother's posture that signaled joy or concern. For 2 days he did nothing but watch, building a complex mental schematic of the neighborhood's pulse. He learned the rhythm of every car, the schedule of every delivery, the predictable arc of every dog walker's route. He was establishing a baseline, a perfect model of normalcy against which any deviation would scream for attention. It was on the 3rd day that the first discordant note was played. A dark sedan, clean and unremarkable, parked 3 spots down from Clara's house. It stayed for exactly 7 minutes before driving away. Too short for a visit, too long for a drop-off. Later, the recycling bins were collected an hour later than his established schedule. A minor detail, insignificant to anyone else, but to Leo, it was a tear in the fabric of the predictable. These were the whispers his eyes could hear, the subtle signs that the neighborhood's placid surface was merely a thin veneer over something else. He wasn't looking for a confession written in the sky. He was looking for the quiet anomalies, the tiny lies the street was telling. His focus began to drift, pulled by a magnetic, almost unnerving source of energy, Mr. Henderson from across the street. The man was a caricature of neighborly perfection. Always tending his prize-winning roses, offering a wide, toothy grin to everyone who passed, his wave almost painfully enthusiastic. But Leo saw more. He saw the way Henderson's eyes weren't on his roses, but were constantly scanning the street, his gaze lingering on Clara's house. He saw how the man's cheerful greetings were a performance, a carefully constructed facade of harmlessness. The friendliness wasn't genuine, it was a tool. A form of camouflage designed to make people look away, to dismiss him as nothing more than the friendly old man next door. The suspicion solidified into a cold certainty. Leo began to catalog Henderson's movements with the same intensity he had applied to the entire street. The man's routine, which at first seemed random, was anything but. His trips to the hardware store never resulted in new tools. His lengthy gardening sessions seemed to produce no visible results. He was watching just as Leo was. But his surveillance felt different. It felt proprietary, possessive. One afternoon, Henderson was out, trimming his hedges, and as Leo watched from his window, the man looked up, his eyes locking directly with Leo's for a fleeting second. The smile he offered wasn't friendly. It was a challenge. It was the silent acknowledgement of one predator to another, and in that moment, Leo knew the quiet street held a far more dangerous secret than he ever imagined. The arrival of the police was less a comfort and more a violation. Their flashing lights sliced through the evening calm, drawing curious neighbors to their windows and casting a harsh, clinical glare on the family's private tragedy. The 2 officers moved with a practiced, almost bored efficiency, their questions to the distraught husband a familiar litany of domestic strife. They were searching for the obvious fractures in the family's life. Money problems, jealousy, a secret lover. Our investigation was a checklist, a process of elimination that began and ended with the most common, most brutal human failings. They were looking for a monster they already understood. When they finally turned to Leo, their gaze was dismissive. He was just the quiet kid next door, a peripheral character in the drama. "Did you hear any shouting?" one asked, his pen poised over a notepad. "A car leaving in a hurry?" They were hunting for the loud, clear signals of a crime. Leo shook his head. The evidence he held was a whisper, not a scream. It was in the subtle wrongness of a neighbor's smile, in the unnatural tidiness of a yard, in the chilling absence of any visible sign of struggle. How could he translate a feeling of profound dread into their language of sirens and yellow tape? He tried. He led the younger officer into the quiet house, his finger pointing toward the symbol left in the dust on a forgotten end table. The officer squinted, then offered a placating smile. "Probably just from one of the kids' toys. Don't worry about it." When Leo attempted to voice his deep-seated suspicion of the man across the street, his words came out jumbled, his reasoning sounding more like paranoia than perception. To a mind trained in procedure and precedent, Leo's insights were just static, the incoherent ramblings of a person who simply didn't understand how the real world worked. The dismissal was gentle but absolute. "We've got it from here, son," the older officer said, placing a heavy, patronizing hand on Leo's shoulder. "You've been a big help, but this is our job now." They had their protocol, their list of prime suspects, and their preferred narrative. A cryptic symbol and a neighbor with a weird vibe were inconvenient details that cluttered their clean, simple case file. Leo was officially sidelined, his unique perspective deemed worthless by the very people who were supposed to be searching for the truth. He was an anomaly they couldn't process, so they chose to ignore him. The patrol car departed, and the streetlights reclaimed the night from the flashing emergency strobes. The silence that returned was profound, but it was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of abandonment. Leo stood alone on the lawn, realizing with cold certainty that the official investigation was a performance, a bureaucratic ritual that would lead nowhere near the truth. The system had failed. He was the only one who saw the real clues, the only one who understood the nature of the threat. The burden was now his and his alone. The real investigation was just beginning. The sirens faded, leaving the bitter taste of dismissal. Leo understood then. Police were looking for a broken lock, a footprint, tangible evidence. They were searching for a storybook monster. But the fear in Clara's eyes wasn't born of something so simple. It was a modern dread that couldn't be dusted for prints. He retreated from the window, the neighbor now a piece of a larger puzzle. The real battlefield wasn't the lawn outside. It was the invisible space between her devices, the silent ether where the real danger lived. Accessing her digital life was a line he never thought he'd cross, a profound violation of the trust he sought to protect. But the alternative was to stand by while an unseen force dismantled her from within. He justified it as a necessary evil, a surgical intrusion to find a cancer he couldn't see. Using old passwords and security questions he knew by heart, he slipped past the digital gatekeepers. He wasn't an invader. He was a ghost walking through the halls of a home that had suddenly become haunted. At first, the surface seemed normal. Social media, a cluttered inbox, smiling selfies, the public Clara. But Leo knew every digital house has hidden rooms. He dug into archived messages, deleted folders, and obscure app caches. That's when he found it, a single, deleted message containing only a cryptic hyperlink. He was about to follow a trail far more sinister than any physical one. If you've ever had that chilling gut feeling, hit the like button and tell us in the comments what you think he's about to find. The link led to a private forum, a walled garden of whispers. Here, under a pseudonym, was a Clara he didn't recognize. She spoke of anxieties he never knew, insecurities amplified by one dominant user. This figure, Echo, never threatened. Instead they soothed. They validated her fears, isolating her with logic that was both comforting and corrosive. Echo agreed her friends didn't understand, that her family held her back, that only they truly saw her. It was a masterclass in psychological erosion, a slow poisoning of her trust in everyone but them. Leo scrolled for hours, a cold sickness spreading through him. This wasn't a stalker, it was a puppeteer. The threat wasn't a knife, but a perfectly crafted sentence delivered at the right moment. Echo was severing Clara's ties to reality, becoming the sole arbiter of her truth. The neighbor, the car, they were red herrings, distractions from the real war. The enemy wasn't at the gate. They were already inside, living in the glow of her screen, whispering directly into her mind. The monster wasn't coming for her, it was convincing her that everyone else was. The symbol was everywhere, yet nowhere. Hidden in plain sight within the digital noise of Clara's life, it was a ghost in the machine. Leo isolated it, a jagged, asymmetrical spiral that seemed to mock the very concept of order. It wasn't a corporate logo or a piece of internet art. It was a signature, a brand seared into the metadata of encrypted messages and the corner of doctored images. He saw it repeated in conversations he was never meant to see, a silent, ever-present observer in the dialogue between Clara and the shadow she called a friend. Each instance was a breadcrumb, a deliberate marker left by an architect of chaos. It felt ancient and digital all at once, a sigil designed not for magic, but for a very modern, very terrifying kind of ownership. Standard search engines returned nothing, a digital dead end. The symbol didn't exist on the surface web. This forced Leo deeper into the internet's unindexed catacombs. He ran the image through advanced reverse search algorithms, cross-referencing its geometric patterns against databases of symbols from forgotten forums and defunct social networks. For hours, the screen was a cascade of failures. Then a single, flickering match. Not a public website, but a cached profile from a darknet message board, deleted years ago. The profile was a ghost with no name, just a string of alphanumeric code and that one single image, the jagged spiral. It was the predator's calling card, the first solid piece of an identity built to be invisible. That alphanumeric string was the key. It was a unique identifier, a digital fingerprint the user had carelessly recycled. Leo plugged it into a deep archive search tool, a program that scours the GHOSTS of the internet for connections. The result that came back made the blood in his veins run cold. The same identifier was tagged in a public post from 18 months prior, a memorial post. It was for a teenage girl from another state, a girl who had walked away from her life, leaving behind a note no one could understand. Her friends and family had pleaded for information online, sharing her picture, her story. And deep in the comments, almost lost to time, was a single cryptic message from that anonymous profile. One case could be a coincidence. Two was a pattern. Leo followed the thread, and the pattern began to unravel into a horrifying tapestry. The alias, the symbol, they were a match set. He found another girl 2 years back. Another town, another family shattered by a sudden, inexplicable disappearance. Her digital footprint also showed a slow withdrawal from friends, followed by an obsession with a new, all-consuming online confidant. He found a third, then a fourth. Each case was a chilling echo of Clara's. The same grooming tactics, the same psychological isolation, the same final, cryptic messages laced with a shared, secret language. This wasn't a series of random tragedies, it was a methodology, a hunt, refined and repeated with chilling precision. This was no lone wolf. The technical sophistication required to maintain such complete anonymity across multiple platforms, over several years, was staggering. The predator used layered encryption, proxy chains that bounced across continents, and custom-coded malware to cover their tracks. This level of operational security hinted at something far more organized than a single, disturbed individual. It suggested a network, a collaborative effort. The single predator he had been hunting was multiplying before his eyes, transforming from a singular threat into a decentralized, faceless organization. Clara wasn't just a victim of a person, she was the target of an operation, a well-oiled machine designed to find, isolate, and erase the vulnerable. The web of victims spread across Leo's monitors, a constellation of stolen futures. Each node, a life manipulated. Each connection, a thread of psychological venom. But for Leo, this wasn't just a pattern, it was an echo. The sight of it didn't just ignite his professional fury, it struck a deeper, colder chord, a discordant memory he had spent years trying to silence. The symbol, the methodology, the slow, deliberate isolation of the target, he had seen this exact brand of evil before. It was a ghost that had haunted his every waking moment, the specter of a failure so profound it had redefined the very purpose of his existence. This was no longer about a stranger named Clara. This was about a promise he had broken long ago. Her name was Maya, his younger sister. She was the light in his world, a whirlwind of creative energy who saw the internet not as a network of servers and code, but as a boundless canvas for her art and friendships. She trusted its anonymity, embraced its connections, and never saw the shadow that crept into her digital life. Leo, then a rising star in corporate cybersecurity, was too busy building firewalls for faceless corporations to notice the one crumbling in his own home. He saw her late nights online as teenage rebellion, her sudden secrecy as a phase. He dismissed the subtle shifts in her personality, the dimming of her vibrant spirit as growing pains, never once suspecting she was being systematically dismantled by an unseen puppeteer. The discovery came too late, a gut-wrenching post-mortem of a life erased. After she was gone, Leo tore through her digital footprint with a desperation he'd never known. He found the hidden chats, the coercive messages, the carefully constructed reality that had replaced her own. He saw how the predator had isolated her from friends, from family, from him. The manipulator had used her own hopes and insecurities as weapons against her, twisting her world until the only escape she could see was the one he offered. Leo possessed all the skills to see it, to stop it, but he had been looking in the wrong direction. The silence in their home was a testament to his failure, an unbearable weight of what-ifs. That failure became his forge. He walked away from a lucrative career, from the accolades in the corner office, and descended into the dark web, into the very trenches where these predators thrived. He turned his grief into code, his guilt into algorithms. He built a system not to protect data but to protect souls. Every piece of software, every tracking protocol he designed, was a brick in a fortress he wished he had built for Maya. His life was no longer his own. It became a relentless, obsessive crusade. He hunted them not for justice in the eyes of the law, but for a personal form of penance, a desperate attempt to balance a scale that could never truly be balanced. Now, staring at Clara's profile, at the same insidious symbol that had been the herald of his own tragedy, the past and present collapsed into a single, searing moment. Clara was no longer just a client or a victim. She was a second chance. The network on his screen wasn't just a criminal enterprise, it was the many-headed hydra that had taken his sister. Every keystroke, every line of code he now deployed, was infused with a decade of cold rage and regret. This wasn't about saving a life anymore. It was about reclaiming one from the ghosts of his past and ensuring this time the silence would be on their end. Leo knew brute force was a fool's errand. He wasn't hunting a common criminal, but a phantom who anticipated every direct attack. To assault the predator's network would be like trying to punch smoke. It would only alert him and allow him to vanish. The predator's strength was his intellect, his calculated foresight. This, Leo understood, had to become his undoing. He couldn't break down the door, so he would build a new one and patiently wait. The plan was not one of aggression, but of intricate deception designed to turn the hunter's own tools against him. The first layer of the trap was purely digital, a ghost built from code and lies. He began constructing a honeypot, a fabricated identity designed to be the predator's ideal victim. This was not a simple profile, but a masterpiece of curated vulnerability. Drawing from the patterns he'd uncovered, Leo created Anya, a persona echoing the precise psychological triggers the predator sought: artistic, intelligent, but deeply isolated. Every detail was placed to be discovered, not found, making the predator believe he was the one in control, that he had found this perfect target on his own. He spent days breathing life into Anya, weaving a believable digital existence. He backdated social media posts, created check-ins at quiet cafes, and wrote poignant entries in a public blog. He crafted a portfolio of melancholic art and a playlist of obscure songs suggesting a sensitive soul. Buried within this digital DNA were the trap's teeth, passive, undetectable trackers. Hidden in image metadata and custom URLs, these scripts were designed to sleep until the predator engaged, capturing his digital signature without him ever knowing he was being watched. But a digital ghost wasn't enough. An IP address could be masked, a trail erased. Leo needed to tether this phantom to the physical world. Through Anya's blog, he began dropping hints about a special place, a sanctuary where she felt safe. The location was an abandoned downtown bookstore he had scouted meticulously. It had only one viable entrance and a blind spot perfect for a hidden, motion-activated camera he installed. This wasn't a direct invitation, but a carefully planted seed, a final stage for the predator to pursue when he felt he had achieved complete control. With the digital architecture complete and the physical stage set, the trap was now active. Anya's profile was live, a beacon of crafted vulnerability pulsing silently online. Leo had built a prison of psychology, its bars forged from the predator's own arrogance and his unquenchable thirst for domination. He had reversed the dynamic, becoming the patient architect of a bespoke reality. Now the agonizing wait began. He had set the board and made his move. The next move belonged to the ghost, and Leo was betting everything the ghost couldn't resist walking into the light. The trap was live. In the sterile glow of a dozen monitors, The world was reduced to lines of code and flickering cursors. Silence, thick and heavy, filled the room, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Leo's mind. Every server fan's work, every click of the hard drives sounded like a countdown. He had transformed his home into a digital fortress, a nerve center for a war being fought in the shadows. Down the hall, Lily slept, blissfully unaware that she was the queen on a chessboard of unimaginable stakes, both the person he had to protect at all costs, and the irresistible bait he had so carefully laid. This terrible paradox was the heart of his plan, a gamble where the price of failure was absolute. His eyes scanned the encrypted channels, the hidden forums where monsters wore anonymous masks. He was a ghost among ghosts, watching for the faintest ripple in the digital ether. He had seeded the network with carefully crafted breadcrumbs, fragments of data designed to lure one specific predator. Now he watched the predator's digital signature circle the bait, a shark sensing blood in the water. It was a delicate dance of patience and precision. He couldn't push, couldn't reveal his hand. He could only watch, wait, and analyze every packet of data, every login attempt, every cryptic post, searching for the one mistake that would unravel everything. The tension was not in the action, but in the agonizing stillness before it. The digital vigil was only half the battle. The physical world had become just as hostile, every shadow a potential threat. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage under siege. Leo moved through the darkened rooms with a practiced silence, his senses honed to a razor's edge. The creak of a floorboard, the rustle of leaves against a window pane, the distant sound of a passing car. Each was a potential signal, a possible breach. He was no longer just a strategist behind a screen. He was a sentinel, a guardian standing between the innocent and the abyss. The line between the ones and zeros on his screen and the cold reality of the hardwood under his feet had completely dissolved. But above all else there was the clock. It was a relentless, merciless presence, its ticking echoing the frantic beat of his own heart. Every second that dripped away was a second Clara remained in captivity, a second closer to an unthinkable fate. This wasn't a game of capture, it was a rescue mission against time itself. The weight of his past failures pressed down on him, the memory of the one he couldn't save fueling a desperate, cold fire in his soul. This time had to be different. It wasn't just about justice or revenge, it was about redemption, a chance to silence the ghost that haunted his every waking moment by saving a life that hung precariously in the balance. And then it happened, a flicker on a monitor. A notification chime that cut through the silence like a gunshot. It wasn't a frontal assault or a clumsy probe. It was a message sent through a heavily anonymized relay, landing in the honeypot inbox he'd created. It contained a single chilling phrase, a specific sequence of words from Lily's compromised private journal, a phrase only the true perpetrator could possibly know. The bait had been taken. The shark had lunged. The agonizing wait was over, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that was equal parts terror and triumph. The digital ghost had just revealed its face. The alert was not a siren, but a digital whisper. A single notification on Leo's screen changed everything. The bait was taken. The file, crafted as leverage against Lily, was opened. For a moment, nothing happened, the terrifying calm before the storm. But beneath the surface, Leo's hidden code executed its command. It wasn't an attack, it was an invitation. It quietly opened a secure backdoor, a ghost in the machine that gave Leo a master key to the Predator's digital fortress. The enemy had just willingly unlocked his own front door and invited the executioner inside. The second phase was an automated cascade. The click triggered a symphony of silent commands spreading through the Predator's network. His own surveillance system, the web used to ensnare victims, was now turned against him. Location data from his phone streamed to a secure server. His laptop microphone activated, capturing ambient sound. Encrypted drives, once thought impenetrable, began surrendering their keys, their contents methodically copied. Every piece of the Predator's shadowy world was being dragged into the light by the quiet, inexorable logic of Leo's code. The confrontation was not of fists, but of dawning, horrifying realization. On the Predator's screen, his files suddenly vanished. They were replaced by a single looping video, a live feed from Clara's room, overlaid with a countdown timer and the GPS coordinates of a federal building. There was no taunting message from Leo, no grand declaration. There was only the cold evidence of his own operation being broadcast back at him, an undeniable reflection of his capture. It was the intellectual equivalent of a checkmate, the moment a king realizes every move leads to his demise. As the Predator sat frozen, the final protocol initiated. The meticulously compiled data, terabytes of incriminating evidence, chat logs, financial trails, and Clara's live feed, was bundled into a single encrypted container. With an automated command, this digital indictment was transmitted to multiple entry points within the National Cybercrime Division. The package was designed to be self-authenticating, its metadata proving it came directly from the perpetrator's own systems. It wasn't a tip, it was a confession, a guided tour through his criminal enterprise. Leo had built a case requiring no investigation, only conviction. The endgame played out on Leo's monitor as a map. He watched the predator's GPS signal, a single red dot, move erratically before stopping. Moments later, multiple blue dots representing law enforcement converged on its position. There was no dramatic shootout or high-speed chase. It was a quiet, efficient response, orchestrated by the ghost in the machine. Leo closed his laptop. He hadn't left his room or spoken to his enemy. He had simply held up a mirror, forcing the monster to confront itself. The silent war was over. Now all that mattered was bringing Clara home. The wail of sirens began to fade, replaced by the quiet crackle of police radios and the murmur of astonished officers. In the sterile light of the precinct, the digital ghost Leo had summoned flickered across a dozen monitors, a complex tapestry of code, rerouted signals, and encrypted traps. The lead detective, a man hardened by decades of straightforward crime, stared not at the screens, but at the silent boy sitting in the corner, a blanket draped over his shoulders. He had seen the evidence, the perfectly timed data dumps, the anonymous tips that were anything but, the digital tripwires that had not just caught the kidnappers but dismantled their entire network. It wasn't just smart, it was precognitive. It was a level of strategic thinking that defied every profile, every textbook, every instinct he had. The silence from the boy was louder than any confession he had ever heard. That silence held a different meaning in another room, where Clara was finally wrapped in her mother's arms. It was a reunion devoid of grand declarations, fueled instead by shuddering breaths and the simple, overwhelming relief of touch. Leo stood by the doorway, a quiet sentinel. He didn't rush in for a hug or seek praise. He simply watched, his gaze steady, observing the fractured pieces of his family clicking back into place. For him, the successful execution of the plan was not a cause for celebration, but a restoration of order. The algorithm had run its course, the desired outcome achieved. The system was back in balance. This was his victory, not the applause of the police but the quiet, steady rhythm of his sister's breathing, safe and sound. The dominoes Leo had set in motion continued to fall long after the initial arrests. The data he had unlocked led to raids in 3 different cities, uncovering a ring far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The criminals, who had seen themselves as apex predators of the digital age, were utterly bewildered. They had been outmaneuvered not by a rival organization or a federal task force, but by an invisible opponent who understood their own systems better than they did. Their arrogance had been their downfall, expertly exploited by a mind that saw the world not as a series of conversations and emotions, but as a system of inputs, outputs, and exploitable variables. They were checkmated by a player who wasn't even sitting at the board. Days later, the quiet returned to their small home. The media frenzy had subsided, the police had given their final, bewildered thanks, and the world outside had moved on. But inside, everything had changed. One evening, the 3 of them sat in the living room. No television, no music, just the soft glow of a lamp. Clara looked at Leo, a deep, knowing gratitude in her eyes that no words could ever capture. Lily reached out, not to ruffle his hair or offer a platitude, but simply to rest her hand on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the immense, unseen world he carried within him. In that shared stillness, a new language was understood. It was a bond forged not in conversation but in crisis, not in words but in unwavering, silent loyalty. This silent world of Leo's reminds us that the most powerful forces are often the ones we cannot see or hear. True genius doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply acts, rearranging the world according to its own silent logic. What other hidden intellects walk among us, their profound capabilities masked by a world that only values the spoken word. The story of Leo is over, but the questions it raises are just beginning. In our next investigation, we explore the incredible case of the Phantom Cartographer, a mapmaker who charted undiscovered lands without ever leaving their room. To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. The deepest mysteries are waiting to be uncovered.